This is Breonna Taylor. She would have been 27 on June 5th, but she was killed by unidentified police in her own bed on March 13th. Officers came to her home to investigate a non-violent crime which she had no part in. When they rammed down her door without identifying themselves or even knocking, her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, assumed that their home was being invaded. It was. Kenneth fired at the invaders with his legally owned firearm and shot an officer in the leg. In retaliation, the police blindly shot into Breonna's home, with so many bullets that they flew through the walls, hitting clocks, pots, and chairs. 8 of those bullets hit Breonna, murdering her while she was sleeping in her own bed. Breonna was an emergency medical technician. She was planning on becoming a nurse and a mother. She worked at 2 hospitals, putting herself on the front lines during the COVID-19 pandemic. Breonna said that one of the things that gave her happiness in life was being able to help others. For me, painting a portrait is a meditative and intimate experience. I'm staring at a person for hours, looking at every detail of their face, describing it over and over again in thin layers of watercolor. So I look at her and I'm struck by just how cute she is. And I see how laid her edges are and that cheeky smile, how proud she looks, how she seems like she would have been the life of the party and would have been able to make anyone burst out laughing. If she had lived, she would have had a Corona birthday party. Maybe it would have been at home, socially distanced, calling her loved ones through Zoom and eating a little cake, and then back to work, to saving lives and risking her own. But instead, on her birthday, her family was in mourning. Why? I want to say her name because I am a Black woman, and Black women are often forgotten in movements like these. I do not want her to be forgotten, and I will not forget her. When I first heard about the death, the recorded lynching of Ahmaud Arbery, all I could think was, they can't stop killing us? Not even in a pandemic? It felt somehow particularly cruel to murder someone with such glee at a time in which we are all afraid for our lives. Not only that, but when Black lives are already at a higher risk of being lost during this pandemic. I ask again, why? Because he was running, taking up public space, saying, I'm allowed to be here, to exist, to be healthy. Some men saw that and made sure to correct him of his misunderstanding. So now people are in the streets, taking up space, saying, this is my space too. I belong here. I claim it. They chant, whose streets? Our streets. One of the topics of my master's thesis was the need for Black people to reclaim public spaces, and how minority populations throughout the world used the same tools to create spaces for themselves. The spaces are hard-won and often short-lived. The tools that they use are nearly always declared illegal. These are spaces that they're not really allowed to have. They're not allowed to loiter. They're not allowed to stroll. They are most certainly not allowed to run. A Black person like me lingering in a garden is suspect. They should not be there staring at petals observing the light falling through leaves, taking mental painting notes. No, they are thieves. They are robbers. They are most certainly up to no good. For how many Black people like me is Pokemon Go not simply about pocket monsters? How many of them are scared to wander because they know that there will be eyes that stare and ask, "Why are you here?" Because there will be people who suddenly rush outside to make sure that this tiny Black woman is not going to what? How many Black students, like a younger me, have to justify their existence on their own campuses? The very campuses that they managed to claw their way into despite all the barriers trying to keep them out. And still, it doesn't end. A Black body in any space is up to no good. Playing frisbee, eating lunch, studying in the library, napping in the common area, in case you forgot this is not where you belong, and someone will be sure to remind you. At Princeton, white women, yes, it was always white women, clutched their purses as I walked by. It was like watching a cartoon. Can you explain to me the threat that they saw? The danger that they perceived in the face of a teenage girl who didn't even weigh 100 pounds? A girl who was barely over 5 feet, who had asthma and who could barely see? But who they saw walking in their direction was not that girl. For them, I could not be a young girl whose shoulders hurt from the weight of books in French and Japanese, just hoping to pass another semester. But I could, of course, be a threat. The act of having dark skin is violence enough for a racist. And from there, well, anything goes. From there, you can attack peaceful protesters because they can never be peaceful once they have committed the high crime of being Black. From there, it makes sense to have police surrounding the protest area in riot gear, just in case. From there is always a justification for why there is a boot on your neck, for why another mother's child did not make it home, for why another child grows up parentless. Well, they shouldn't have, but really there's never, ever anything you can do to erase the original sin of having dark skin. Do you know what it is to live knowing that for some people, your very existence is violence? So, holding this knowledge, I worry for the protesters. I worry for their safety. I worry that they will get sick. But why worry about potentially catching a disease that may kill you when you know, without a shadow of a doubt, that your fellow man has been killing you for centuries? When you know that so many of them want to fight to keep killing you? If you will die anyway, why not at least do something? The two problems are one and the same anyway. Racism is a public health crisis. Why do Black and brown people die from diseases in general and COVID-19 in particular more often than white people? There are a few explanations that you can choose. The first is that brown and Black people are poor and do not take care of themselves. I hope that you don't need me to tell you that this is racist. Even if you control for wealth, the disparity still stands. If you control for education, the disparity still stands. Even amongst Black people who are proactive about their health, the disparity still stands. So I ask you for the third time, why? There is another answer that is so steeped in racism that it feels as if it has walked straight off of the plantation. That is, that Black bodies are simply deficient. They are just more prone to disease. There is nothing that we can do about it. This is the same argument that excused the death of slaves. It could not be because of the inhumane treatment that they received from the moment that they were born. No, of course not. It was just that their bodies were weak. So, if we put that argument aside, we have another, that of the unjust treatment of Black and brown bodies within the medical system. To this day, many doctors believe that Black people experience pain differently than white people. They believe that we require fewer pain relievers. They believe that our bodies are somehow stronger, more able to deal with pain and suffering than others. This is a convenient thing to believe when so much of modern medicine, including the entire field of gynecology, is based on the unwilling exploitation of and experimentation on Black bodies. So we receive less medication and less treatment and less care. How many Black people die because of this? How many die because of doctors' maltreatment? How many die because they fear the maltreatment more than they fear the disease? How many Black people die not from cops but from asthma, saying, "I can't breathe"? Did you know that Black people are more likely to have and die of asthma? Did you know that, despite that, it is more difficult for a Black person to receive an asthma diagnosis and treatment? Even the tool that is used to measure lung function is designed specifically to make it harder to diagnose non-white people with asthma. It assumes it is simply normal and natural for non-white people to have reduced lung function. Then, even if you manage to get a diagnosis, the medicines are not designed for you. Black people are often excluded from medical trials, so the very medicines that are meant to save you, like albuterol, are more likely to be ineffective or even actively harm your body. So imagine this cruelty, spraying tear gas on a population that is more likely to die from asthma during a pandemic caused by respiratory illness, when they are protesting the unjust murder of a man whose last words were, "I can't breathe." When we say that we can't breathe, we really can't breathe. I have had asthma since I was a very young child, and yet doctors still question my diagnosis. They will sit in front of me with decades of tests showing that I have reduced lung function on their desk and my inhaler that I carry every day in my hand, and they will ask me, "But do you really have asthma?" They will smile at me and say, "Are you sure it isn't just hay fever?" The idea that Black people are somehow superhuman is still too strong in the medical establishment. It is a terrible problem when you happen, in fact, not to be a superhuman, but simply a regular human who is sick and seeking help. I am thankful to my mother for many things, but I am thankful in particular because, even as an immigrant, she worked hard to find a pediatrician who would see her little children as they were, small, sick, and unable to breathe. Now, as an often sick adult and an immigrant myself, I have to find my own doctors. Each time, I worry. When I go to a new doctor, I worry, will they be racist? Will they, like one doctor, hear me screaming in pain and say that I am faking it? And then when I go to a doctor that I know, I worry, is this the day that I will find out that they are the type of racist who smiles in my face? Like the doctor who told me when I had a simply diagnosable and treatable condition that perhaps the pain that you feel is actually your internalized self-hatred, resulting from what you perceive as racism. Or perhaps like the woman who called the police on Christian Cooper, she was upper class, educated, liberal. She even voted for Obama. Yet, the moment a Black man stepped out of his place in a public space, she had one response. By the way, let us not forget that this public space was once private. They stood on the land that was once Seneca Village, a Black community that was destroyed so that Central Park could be built into a beautiful space for white people to promenade. Because of course, nothing is really yours when you are Black. So, the moment that Christian Cooper, this gay, Harvard-educated, member of the board of directors for the New York City Audubon Society, assumed that he had a right to that space, and perhaps she was the one in the wrong, she was quick to remind him that none of those things matter. She expected the police, just like those ladies who clutched their bags away from me, to see him as nothing more than a threat. She didn't use the N-word, but she didn't have to. She says African American man, and the words are poison in her mouth. I am sure that I am not the only Black person who thought that it was a small miracle that Christian Cooper did not end up yet another hashtag on our ever-growing list. Now, in this world that I have described to you, what are we supposed to do? First, to Black folks, I see you, I love you, I'm praying for you. Be gentle with yourself. Now, more than ever, it can be so hard these days and the events are constantly re-traumatizing us. Showing up is important, but so is getting rest and taking care of yourself. The battle is long. This is a time of anger and sadness. These are tools. Use them. Use them to work, to paint, to write, to speak, to care for others, to care for yourself. Again, I see you. I love you. I'm praying for you. To non-Black folks, we see you. We see your silence. We see your action. We see your indifference, and we see your speech. I am sure I am not the only one who has noticed the dearth of commentary on this topic amongst watercolor channels on YouTube. I have also noticed those of you have spoken up, and I am so thankful for it. Think twice before sharing another video of the abuse or public lynching of a Black person. What point does it serve? How does it help? Does it simply spread outrage? Is it worth traumatizing your Black brothers and sisters over? How many times have you seen Black death appear on your screen? For us, this has been a decade of recorded Black murders. We see these things over and over again, and each time it is a fresh new horror. Every time I see George Floyd, I see my father. These videos often desensitize viewers to Black death and violence against Black bodies. How often do you see gruesome videos of white bodies dying come through on your feed? I ask you again, think carefully. Educate yourself. The internet is vast and wide. So many things are searchable. Learn your history. Make an effort to work against the racism that you have learned, because we all have internalized racism from living in this society. Fight against the urge to deny that it is within you too. Sit with your discomfort. If it is not something that you have tried before, this will be uncomfortable. It will probably still be uncomfortable even if it is already a practice of yours. That's okay. Racism wants you to prefer comfort over the safety of your Black brothers and sisters. Don't let it win. Listen to Black people when they tell you things. Believe them. Show up for Black people. If you see what looks like a strange confrontation between a non-Black person and a Black person, do not leave the Black person alone. Oftentimes, your simple presence and letting the other non-Black person know that you are watching is enough to de-escalate the situation. If need be, step in and raise your voice. If you see a Black person being interrogated or arrested by the cops, do not leave them alone. Watch the interaction. If need be, take a video recording. Calmly narrate the situation, specifying what you are actually seeing. Say things like, they are not resisting. They are complying with the officer's orders, so that there is a record in case it is needed in the future. Share this video with the person involved if possible. Do not put this video up on the internet without the permission of the person being filmed, and delete the video if it is not needed. Think twice, 3 times, 4 times about calling the police. Do you really need the police in this situation? Is this simply a minor inconvenience? Or do you actually fear for your life? Remember that for the Black people around you, even calling the police for help can lead to a death sentence. Take responsibility for your own education. Do not press Black people for unpaid labor. Some people will freely teach you, but demanding it from anyone is neglecting your duty to educate yourself. There are lots of amazing resources out there right now. Take advantage of them. Lift up Black people. Do not let yourself be in the room with no Black people in it. What does that mean? It could be as simple as making an effort to always name a Black person when asked, who would you recommend we reach out to next? So often, Black people are left out of these chains of recommendations and miss out on many opportunities as a result. Or, if you have a platform, you can do a collaboration with a Black person in your field. If you are in the position of hiring, you can make sure that Black and brown faces are present not only at the lowest level, but at higher levels in your company. Advocate for wage transparency. If your Black coworkers are getting paid less, demand equal pay. Cite Black people. Normally, this is something that you would hear in an academic setting, but it is necessary outside of academia as well. The knowledge and work of Black people, particularly Black women, is somehow treated as if it is public knowledge. People will take their creations and never mention their names. You see it on TikTok, you see it with slang, I even see it here on Art YouTube. If a Black person has inspired you, say their name. Let other people know who they are. Let them inspire other people too. Talk to your people. Talk to your friends. Talk to your family. Talk to your coworkers. There are so many spaces that you will be in that Black people cannot enter, and it is up to you to be the voice that protects your Black brothers and sisters in those situations. Racism begins in these small, private spaces, and it grows until it erupts in public. International folks. I have been so happy to see the widespread international support of the American protests throughout the world. It is amazing and beautiful. But as a Black woman who has lived the majority of her adult life abroad, I take pause when I see international audiences highlighting racism in America. So often, America is used as a scapegoat to say, see, look how terrible they are over there. We would never be like that. When I speak to people here in Germany about my experiences, they often tell me, but at least things here are not as bad as in America. They tell me this in the country in which I am screamed at in the street, in which I have been pushed and shoved, in the country where it is a part of everyday life for me to see racist caricatures on the packaging of products, where people excitedly explain that a word for a certain chocolate is N-word kisses, where it took until 2018, 2 years ago, for the severed heads of some of those who were killed during the genocide of the Herero and Amankwa people by the German Empire to be returned to their homes. In this country where, for a decade, brown people were shot in broad daylight by a terrorist organization, and police refused to investigate it. Instead, they were blamed for their own murders. People have told me, we cannot be racist because we learned after World War II. This in the country where hundreds of thousands of Sinti and Roma people were killed in a genocide that was not even formally recognized until the 80s. Yet, you can still go and buy sauce that refers to the Sinti and Roma with the same derogatory term that was used on the documents that sent them to their deaths. Please, continue to tell me how you cannot be racist. I say all of this to mean, know your own history. I am not just speaking to Germans, but to everyone outside of the USA. Racism is not an exclusively American problem. How has your country treated Black people? How does it treat them today? What are the minorities in your country? Are they well represented? Are they safe? Are you marching for them? Are you protecting them? Do you know their names? I studied prejudice towards minorities in Japan as part of my master's, and the response I got when I explained this was always the same. But we do not have minorities, or there is no racism in Japan. But of course, this isn't true. So imagine my shock when I saw people marching in the streets in Tokyo to protest the xenophobic and racist behavior of their own police. I am so happy to see it. And I hope that it continues and that it goes deeper. And I hope the same for minorities all over the world. It is very important for America to know that the eyes of the world are watching. It is also important for your own people to know that you are watching the leaders of your own nations too. Okay, now, to everybody, what can we do? Of course, you can protest. There are protests happening in every single state in the United States and all over the world. If there is not a protest near you, you can start one. I have seen more than one-person protest in the last couple of days. And what if you can't protest? This is an especially important thing to consider for people who are high-risk groups for COVID-19, as well as disabled and chronically ill people. There are still things that you can do. Donate. If you cannot be on the front lines, you can help those who are supporting those who are. Donate to bail funds. Donate to the National Lawyer League. I will have a list of places to donate in the description and also in a linked blog post. Support Black businesses. There are so many things that we consume every day. Can you get your hairspray from a Black-owned business? What about your clothing, your makeup, your food, your software? Every purchase will help lift up a Black entrepreneur. Black capitalism will not end racism, but we do currently live in a capitalist society. What if you don't have money to donate? There are a ton of things that you can do that cost no money at all. Contact your representatives. Tell them that you want to implement legislation that protects Black people from police violence. Sign petitions. There are petitions calling for justice for so many victims of police brutality. You can add your name to the list. Volunteer. If you have skills, there is an organization that needs them. Perhaps you know graphic design. Perhaps you know how to build websites. Perhaps you can paint. Perhaps you can garden. Perhaps you can knit. Perhaps you can sew. Perhaps you just have able hands and want to help. There is a place for you. This movement requires a community of people willing to share their talents. Stop consuming from people and organizations that promote hate and do not support Black people. There are some times when we have no choice about the things that we consume. If your medication is only made by one company, you cannot stop buying it because of the racism of the manufacturer. But most products are not like that. Do not give your money to organizations that have shown themselves to be against Black and brown people. Do not support hate. Use your platform. If you have a following on any social media, raising your voice can spread the message to an even wider audience. Use your space to educate others. Use your space to fundraise for supporting causes. Make sure that your safe is a safe space for Black people, and do not allow racism in your comments. Let racists know that they are not welcome. Watch fundraising YouTube videos. You are on YouTube right now. And there are many videos that have been created that will donate all of their ad revenue to different organizations supporting Black Lives Matter. Go watch them. Do not support companies that use prison labor. The modern prison system is an extension of slavery. Many companies like Victoria's Secret and Starbucks use prison labor. It is very profitable to them because prisoners are either paid extremely low wages or none at all. Educate yourself about them and refuse to purchase from them. I will have a link to some of these companies in the description and on my blog. Work towards the abolition of the prison industrial complex. Police are just one step in maintaining the prison industrial complex. The United States imprisons more people than any nation in the world. These prisons do not have the goal of rehabilitation, but are instead run with the goal of exploiting the labor of prisoners. Despite earning almost no money, prisoners are often required to pay for things like medical treatment, speaking to their families over voice chat, and even reading books. This is inhumane. Do not show the faces of protesters in videos or photos that you share. This can lead to them being arrested or targeted in the future. For your own safety and for the safety of others, remove any metadata as well, including location information. There are applications that you can use that will do this for you. Support Black creators. If you are into something, there is probably a Black creator making content about it. There are Black creators talking about books, movies, video games, and of course, art. Watch their videos. Read their blogs. Subscribe, follow, all that stuff that we always tell you. One important thing here is don't follow someone just for the sake of following a Black person. If you do not actually read or watch what they put out, they will be negatively impacted by you following or subscribing to them. And the last thing is, educate yourself. Dedicate yourself to being anti-racist. Continue that work throughout your life. All of this work begins here, inside of you. Thank you for watching this video and listening to me. I hope that you all stay safe and healthy. I will have links to how you can help in the description, and I will also have a blog post with even more links, a transcript of this video, citations for the things that I spoke about, and Black creators that you can support. All of the proceeds from this painting will go to support the Loveland Foundation and bail funds throughout America. I will be also making prints of this painting, and a portion of those proceeds will also go to organizations that require funding to support the movement. I plan on painting portraits of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, with the profits being donated in a similar fashion. From now on, a portion of all of my sales will be donated, including the money that I receive from Patreon. So thank you to my patrons for supporting a Black artist and these organizations. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys next time. And I always mean it, but I mean it more than ever now. Be gentle with yourself. Bye.